This is episode 71 with the best of 2018. Welcome to Inspired Money. My name is Andy Wong, a managing partner at Runnymede Capital Management. Each week, we bring you an interesting person to help you get inspired, shift your perspectives on money, and achieve incredible things. From making it to giving it away, Inspired Money means making a difference, creating something bigger than oneself, and maybe, just maybe, making the world a better place. Thank you for joining me. Hey, Inspired Moneymaker, welcome back. If it's your first time listening, welcome. Inspired Money is different from other personal finance podcasts because we don't want to just learn how to live with money. We want to put money in a positive light to inspire ourselves to live richer lives, make a greater impact, and together make the world a better place. Thank you for joining me on this mission. So once again, we find ourselves at this time of year, and I can't believe it. Inspired Money has been running for about a year and a quarter, and I've learned a ton talking to all the many guests that we've had on the show. This week, I went back and listened to the most downloaded episodes of 2018. It's not a totally fair comparison because the most recent shows over the last month or so have not had time to rack up downloads. For example, I'm sure Rachel Cruz's episode will be right up there given a little more time. But for simplicity, I took the top downloaded shows and I want to highlight 10 tips for us to consider as we plan for 2019. Listen, see if something resonates with you, and try picking just one thing to commit to over the next 12 months. I'd love to see what happens if you can apply one thing consistently. I'm super grateful for you listening to Inspired Money and joining me on this mission to grow, save, spend, and give money in the most impactful way possible. Let's kick it off with Peter Polson. He's CEO of Tiller Money, the only service that automatically updates Google Sheets and Excel with your daily spending, transactions, and balances. Before we get to his tip, some recurring themes of Inspired Money are purpose, passion, and impact. And I love what Peter had to say about this.
Underlying that all, I do believe that we're put here on this earth to make an impact. And people make an impact in a lot of different ways. You actually, in your tagline for your podcast, which I love, you talk about maybe, just maybe, making a difference. And I would actually, I love that, but I would actually say, Andy, like, strike the maybe, because you and all your listeners, they're making a difference. Like, period. Like, you can't help be on this earth but make a difference. And so I love that message.
So what do you think? Should we get rid of the maybe? Do we need to be coy? I'm open to suggestions. All right, let's get to the first tip. Do you know where you're spending your money every month? Most people don't. If you're thinking about getting started with budgeting and you want to take control of your personal finances, Peter gives some helpful tips on getting started.
I would simply start by tracking and not budgeting. I think that budgeting can be really powerful, and there are a lot of people who are budgeting with great success. The challenge with budgeting is it's also hard, and it's easy to get stuck in, well, does this expense fall into this budget or that? And then also to judge yourself, like, I blew through my budget this month and I'm terrible. I'm a bad person, or we're a bad couple, or whatever, and we're never going to make this work. And I think that those are some of the challenges with budgeting starting. So if in your first step, I encourage people to just start tracking, and which means ultimately go in and see. But most people can say with precision, okay, here's what I make. So you probably know your income. But most people, if you ask most people to draw a pie chart, what do you spend? They'd have no idea. I ask people that all the time, and I'm just to understand that better. And most people really don't have any idea what the pie chart looks like of what they spend. And so think of it really as, I'm just going to track and I'm going to put together that pie chart. What are the big categories? How much are we spending each month? And where does that money go? And start there. And what's interesting is that could be the first step. And you may decide, this is helpful. I want to shrink one of the slices of that pie chart, or I want to reduce one of those categories or buckets. It doesn't have to be a pie chart as the way you think about it. And that may lead to some budgeting, but it doesn't have to. But just start tracking. What's interesting about tracking is you're not just going to become aware, but as humans, we can't help but make progress when we are faced with information that's constructive. And so what we see time and time again is that people's spending starts to change when they start tracking, and it starts to better align with their values. Because otherwise, without that, you have no feedback. It's so hard to know. The technology today makes it so easy to spend with a click or a swipe or a tap. No wonder people have no idea where they're spending their money. So I would just say simply start by tracking.
If you're not tracking your spending, consider giving it a try. I love that Peter says that it can change how you're spending, and you may just start spending more aligned with your values. Listen to the entire episode. It's episode 45, entitled The Power of Spreadsheets and Tracking Your Money with Peter Polson. It's a fun episode because in addition to tips on spreadsheet tracking and budgeting, we also explored his professional and entrepreneurial journey. For tip number 2, we talked to a former WWE wrestler. Do you know Colt Cabana? He's a living example of someone who's successfully chasing his passion and dream to make a living wrestling. I'm super impressed by Colt because not only is he chasing his dream, but it's his scrappiness as an entrepreneur to make things work, to generate multiple income streams from things like selling t-shirts, from starting a podcast, and even from starting a website where his fellow wrestlers can also sell merchandise. Tip number 2 is to chase your passion, even if that means living frugally.
I romanticize about the wrestling that came from the carnival, the circus folk, and wrestlers from the 60s and 70s from like Memphis wrestling, where they would go from town to town to town and they wouldn't get paid a lot, so they had to really budget themselves. And as a kid, I was obsessed with wrestling, so I'd always read. I'd read, and I was horrible in school, but I loved taking in information about professional wrestling, I was just enamored by it because I knew that their lifestyles was going to be my lifestyle, and I wanted to live that lifestyle. So I almost took pride in getting by spending $3 a day on food, you know what I'm saying? Or figuring out where the discounts were, or even, I'm not proud, but I think it's, like when you go to when I wrestle at a VFW hall and maybe I take their paper plates and maybe I take their silverware, you know what I'm saying? Like, this is what you had to do to make sure that I could be a wrestler to make a living. And that was kind of the wrestler's lifestyle on the independent small scene back in the day.
Yeah, it goes back to what you were saying about being scrappy.
Scrappy is a good word.
Being able to just keep doing that.
And what's cool is now I make a really good living, but I still have those same tendencies. I don't like to spend money. I like to save money. I always assume I'll just get hurt, so I want to make sure I have money to fill up that month, but now in my head I'm like, okay, I'm good for a year, I'm good for 2 years, and that's the way my head works. I don't know if for good or bad, but there's, it's interesting, my mom said to me, you have to have that backup plan or safety net, and now I have, I feel like I'm weirdly building up a safety net by making money and kind of putting it in good investments, but not spending more than I make. I try to save as much as I humanly possibly can.
I love that. Perspectives from a professional wrestler on the power of saving. That's really powerful stuff. We had a great time chatting and getting some insight on what it's like on the independent pro wrestling circuit, what it was like for him to make it to the big time, which was the WWE, only to have his contract canceled early, and how he dealt with that. Listen to the full episode, which is episode 51, The Remarkable Rise of an Indie Pro Wrestler, Colt Cabana. Tip number 3 comes from Bola Sokunbi of Clever Girl Finance, who I heard speak in New York City. Bola is a master of saving and side hustles, a powerful 1-2 punch. She was able to save $100,000 in about 3.5 years while making a salary of just about $54,000 before taxes in New York City. So tip number 3 is about forming good money habits.
I feel like if you have money coming in, you have the opportunity to save. And I think a lot of people feel like when money is coming in and it doesn't quite cover all their bills, or they only have like a couple dollars left over, it's not worth the effort to save. But I disagree. I think even if you have 50 cents left over, you save it, because it's, in those early stages, especially when you're not earning a lot or you don't have a lot of money, it's not about the amount, it's about the habit and the consistency. And that's what makes everybody successful with saving. You can be making $1 million, and if you haven't developed the habit and consistency, you're not going to save anything. So I've driven 20 minutes to go to my bank to deposit $1 before because I wanted to keep up with my habit of saving. And I get to the counter and the lady's like, "What?" And I'm like, "Yes, I would like to put this $1 in my bank account." She's like, "Do you want a balance?" I said, "Yes." +1, give it to me. Give me my bank balance.
When Bola first said this to me, I kind of thought that it was silly and illogical. And it is kind of illogical, right? Because it makes no sense to drive any distance to go deposit $1 because you're going to spend more in gas. But after thinking about it, there's a reason for the phrase creatures of habit. We all have a tendency to do what we know. And that's why I think it's so important for us to push ourselves outside of our comfort zones. So I've reconsidered this one. Start a small habit. And once you've formed that good habit, don't form bad habits. Let it grow, and it can really be impactful. All right, so now we move away from the saving game to the business game and trying to make money. So instead of saving, we want to make money. So our next tip comes from Howard Gogel, president and CEO of My Limo and Gogel Auto. He and his brother took their father's gas station and grew it to multiple businesses that includes tires, car rentals, and limo service. Howard's episode has performed really well. And in our conversation, I asked him what it means to be a business owner.
Well, it's pretty special. I mean, it's a lot of sacrifice. It's something that if you don't own your own business, I don't think you understand or can appreciate the mentality of what goes on. I mean, I'm trying to explain to my staff now, my 3 key people who run 3 different divisions of the company. One is about obsessing over expenses, and not that employees are expenses, employees are assets, and they're tremendous assets. But you have to control expenses. You just can't. I mean, General Motors, which went broke and their stock went from $100 a share to worthless, their nickname was Generous Motors at one point in their history, and they would throw money at a problem. So being a business owner is a blessing. It's a curse. It's allowed me to live an extraordinary life. I've met hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands, of wonderful people, and it's been a tremendous blessing in my life. It has taken its toll on my personal life. I mean, trying to balance family life and business life has always been a challenge. I'm getting better at it. I'm certainly not perfect at it, I'll tell you that. Just ask my wife, she'll tell you.
All right, so I take it back. Howard talked about expenses. So it's still about savings, but owning your own business can have a huge payoff too. To listen to the full episode, go to episode 47, Building a Business from Gas Station to Rentals and Limousines with Howard Gogel. Whether you're in business or not, we all have to sell. Sometimes we're selling a product or service. Other times you're selling yourself. Even if you're in a corporate job, oftentimes you have to sell to your boss on a project or why you're the right person to lead that project. So tip number 5 comes from Ryan Serhant, one of the most successful real estate brokers in the world and one of the agents on the popular Bravo series, $1 Million Listing New York. In the episode, he shares lots of tips on how to sell, or in this case, what not to do.
So the biggest mistake that most salespeople make, whether they're selling real estate or tires or insurance or hot tubs, is they put on a salesperson's hat. When they're in front of someone they think is someone they could sell to, they become a salesperson. And no one likes to be sold. right? Everybody likes to go shopping with their friends. That's fun, but no one likes to be sold. So you have to realize that if you don't like to be sold, if you don't like walking into a store and having people come up to you and try to sell you on a 2-for-1 special, then why would anyone want you to do that to them? And think about who your best friend is right now. Assume that you didn't meet that person when you were 4 years old. Maybe it's somebody that you met in the last 5, 10, 2 years, something like that. They were a complete stranger to you beforehand. And you had those initial 10 seconds to get to know them, right? Either with a compliment, story, something that makes a common relationship. And the way you do that, right, is a solid introduction, is a smile because people are attracted to happiness, right? A compliment and something that you have in common with them. Either that you both go to that Starbucks all the time, I always see you here, or it's a holiday, what's your favorite holiday, or it's a birthday, or it's, that part of the city or the town, something super simple that you have in common with someone that could start that conversation. And then you have to remember that everybody likes to hear themselves talk. And the second biggest mistake most salespeople make is that they like to hear themselves talk. And so they talk a client out of the room. And you can't do that, right? You have to talk to somebody and listen to them, which means you have to ask questions. And that was, taking it back to my acting days, the biggest thing I learned from all of my improv classes was things like the question game. So then you just ask people questions. Just keep asking them questions about anything, right? And try to get them to then start talking about what you do for a living, what you do is in sales, and how that could benefit them. And you go from there.
So I've received a lot of positive feedback on this episode. People really seem to like it. Not surprisingly, because Ryan is funny, he's charismatic, he's entertaining, and he provided a lot of very practical information on how to sell and demystifying the skills behind being a great salesperson. And Ryan is certainly that. He and his team nearly sold $1 billion worth of real estate last year. Listen to the full episode. That's episode 65, How to Sell and Earn More Like $1 Million Listing New York Star, Ryan Serhant. Moving along to tip number 6, we talked to Nicole Walters, the former top-selling corporate exec who quit her 6-figure sales job in front of 10,000 people on Periscope because, in her words, her job was feeding her family, but not feeding her soul. So she opened her own private business and product development consulting firm, The Monetized Life. As her audience ramped up, so did her revenue. She built $1 million business in just one short year, and she continues to grow. So here we get pretty specific. Nicole shares the importance of creating and developing a customer map for your business.
There is a relationship, and I call it the customer map, and I map all of my customers. So one of the things that I teach in any of my experiences that's a corporate foundation is that you want to make sure that you are presenting your clients with an opportunity to still work with you if you have the means to actually teach them and the skill set and grow within your business. So I like to bring in most of my clients under Fierce Clarity, which is my initial intro product. If they don't have any business idea or they need idea validation. So they start there. Then the next product that they go to is 1K One Day, which is a mid-range product that allows them to really build in those business foundations, make sure that their T's are crossed and their I's are dotted, so that way they are prepared to really generate revenue as well as start generating those initial income streams. We actually start building out some of those income streams. After that, they're welcome to join my membership group, which never launches to the public, and that's $1 million membership group. But I afford any existing students, the opportunity to come into that experience because they have that foundational learning, and then the teachings and information I provide in there is more targeted to where they're going. And I'm very present in that experience. After the member group, then they go to, in the member group, they have an opportunity to be eligible. Usually you're selected and invited to one of my high ticket opportunities. So that remains, booked out, and we have a wait list for that as well. Then after one of my high ticket opportunities, as well as within my member group, they have an opportunity to engage in a certification program. So that's another opportunity for them as well. And then, of course, I have people there who, after working with me for, maybe about a year or so, usually scale to that, scale to that 7-figure mark. And if they do scale to that 7-figure mark, they may eventually become a business to business client. So so absolutely. I wouldn't even call it really a sales funnel in the traditional sense. It's why I use the term customer map. There's an opportunity for you to enter the map in different areas, but there's also a place for you to go and a place for you to grow.
I really enjoyed talking to Nicole Walters. She's funny, she's fast talking, she's got so much energy, and she's always focused on delivering valuable content if you're interested in launching and growing your own online business. Listen to the full episode, that's show 58, From 9 to 5 to Building a $1 Million Business with Nicole Walters. For tip number 7, we talked to Chandler Bolt, founder of the Self-Publishing School, and he talks about the benefits of publishing a book, passive income, and more. In an amazing update from Chandler, recently I read that Self-Publishing School just passed $10 million in total business since launching in February of 2015. That means that his course has helped so many students to write and launch their books. And he mentioned that the best part is that he's just getting started. About half of his revenue came in 2018. He's built a foundation to help many more authors in 2019 and beyond. In Chandler's episode, I really loved the part when he talked about the importance of making big decisions.
When looking through that lens, I think that gives me the courage to make sometimes seemingly crazy decisions, like dropping out of school, or, I bought out my business partner and went multiple 6 figures in debt like 2 years ago. And then, that was a big gamble. The business wasn't doing well financially, but, I bought him out. Then I paid off that debt over the next 11 months. And then now we're growing like crazy. And the return on that investment for me has been ridiculous. I mean, it's been a really great return. But those are sometimes in the moment seem like crazy decisions, but then go on to pay off in the long term. So I guess maybe one more thing on that is just, I remember a mentor early on, he said there's a difference between taking risks and being risky. The smartest, most successful people take risks. The poorest and most unsuccessful people are risky. So like playing the lottery is risky. Taking a calculated risk to buy out your business partner is a risk, right? So when I take those big moves, I just try to think to myself, am I taking a risk or am I being risky?
I love that line of thinking. It's such an important differentiation, taking a calculated risk versus being risky. And oftentimes the resulting outcomes can be so dramatically different. If you have any interest in writing a book, check out that episode because Chandler talks about the importance of creating an asset like a book that can potentially generate passive income ongoing. And he talks about how you can use a book to build your personal brand, to build your authority, and how a book can actually serve as your most inexpensive salesperson. Tip number 8 is about charitable giving. I sat down with Claudia Romo Edelman, a special advisor to the We Are All Human Foundation. She's a great communicator and storyteller. Here she talks about how charitable giving has changed among the biggest donors and how that's impacting everyone, resulting in people's willingness to talk about money and supporting causes that matter to them.
But I really appreciate actually what you're trying to do with your podcast and actually inspire money, because it is something that people that make money need to know how to spend money and how to give money. And I think that one of the transformations I've seen in my lifetime is how the work that I do, humanitarian affairs, is normally passing on the hat, right? Like either to governments and you're asking billions of dollars for foreign aid, or you're asking for fundraisers and so on. But it was always small in comparative terms to normal spending on different things. And there was a game changer that came, and as an example, and that was Bill Gates. And not because of the amount of money he gives, but because he started talking about it. Previously, giving money as charity was anonymous. If you might remember, it was like, no, it's low class to talk about like giving money. If you make it, you should just be quiet about it and so on. And that made the work that I do very hard because people just didn't want to, just the people didn't want to talk about what they were giving. when Bill Gates created the Giving Pledge and got Warren Buffett to say, like, we want to give a lot of our fortune back, guess what happened? Domino effect. A lot of other people said, like, oh my God, I want to give it too. And instead of actually coming out as a show off or as as a lack of manners, it incentivized and changed the game that made it from the M to the B, from the millions of dollars to the billions of dollars that now are circulating, supporting other people through micro credits and cash transfers, and actually supporting big issues like migration and girls' education and health. So that was a very inspired money changer for me.
To listen to the whole episode, go to episode 52, Global Advocate and Champion for Change, Claudia Romo Edelman. So far, we've covered saving, making, giving. Here's a tip for investing, because we know that the most financially successful people have their money working for them. Here I sit down with Danielle Town, New York Times bestselling author of the book Invested, How Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger Taught Me to Master My Mind, My Emotions, and My Money, with a little help from my dad. She and her father, Phil Town, host the podcast Invested. I like this episode because Danielle really talks about her personal story. She's an attorney by training, not an investment person. So she brings a perspective of a non-analytical math investment person and how she developed her investment practice and really grew and developed a love for investing. So here's tip number 9, Danielle's advice for how to get started.
The biggest thing I can say to people who are grappling with starting this thing, it's hard to start. It's definitely a hump to get over. And my number one tip, besides being thankful, which I think is actually number one, is just start. Start right where you are. Start with reading the business news. Don't go to anything boring. Don't deal with anything you don't understand. Just pick some headlines that look cool and probably are about companies you already know about. I mean, talk about Apple. Apple's in the news all the time. Read a couple of articles and start to notice how much you actually know about these companies already, and that you have opinions about these companies. And those opinions may or may not be the same as the one of the article you're reading. And all of a sudden, we can start to notice how much we already know about publicly traded companies. It's not some far-off behemoth that we never touch. It's stuff that's in our homes, and it's services that we use. And as soon as you start to do that and start to notice what's around you, and that there are companies you can invest in all over the place that you already know about, it becomes so much more personal immediately. And that takes about maybe 15 minutes. And all of a sudden, you're seeing things totally differently.
That's great advice from Danielle to just get started. And start slowly by reading some business news, following companies that you're already familiar with because you use or know their products or services. Treat your investment research like it's a muscle that you need to exercise. Start with just a little bit and see if you can increase the weight, so to speak, over time. To listen to the full episode, this is episode 44, Learn to Invest Like Warren Buffett with Danielle Town. All right, we've reached tip number 10. And with tip number 10, we sit down with Tony Horton, the creator of P90X. Tony's story is really amazing because he went from $60,000 in debt to creator of P90X, the #1 home fitness program of all time. Tony shares his path to success, his strong desire to learn, and his enthusiasm to motivate people to be their best. Now, Tony is a huge proponent of personal development and how to affect change. Tip number 10 is embracing the process.
Well, I don't care who you are. Everybody's got weaknesses and strengths, right? I mean, you're a big bodybuilder. There's different body types. When you understand there's ectomorphs, mesomorphs, and endomorphs, we're some combination. Some people are just pure one of those three. Others are combinations of one of those three because, one parent was a Samoan and the other one was a Kenyan track athlete, right? So you just get what you get. That's your genetics. And so what are you going to do with them? And you have to accept reality. I mean, reality is just something that a lot of people are sort of lately, are trying to avoid because it's too painful to look at, to understand, to wrap your arms around. But reality dictates that you are what you are, and so now you have to deal with the consequences of that because we're affected by genetics, environment, and behavior. You control two of them. So those are pretty good odds. I can control my environment, I can control my behavior, so I can end up with a pretty good result even if I have a certain kind of genetics. We can all be strong, we can all be healthy, we can all be fit, we can all be flexible. You know, we can, to a certain extent. I mean, some people are naturally more one of those things than other people are, but you can have some element of all of them if you're willing to put in the time, the work, the effort, fall down a bunch of times, not judge it, be in the moment, and then just keep pushing forward, showing up. If you show up, even if you stink it up, you're still going to be moving forward. There's no such thing as a life chart that goes straight up like a rocket. It always goes up and down, up and down. But if there's consistency and purpose and accountability, then the direction will be upward. You know, and if you stop comparing yourself to others or your expectations of the future or how you used to be in the past, I mean, there's so many things that we do that just get in our way. Then, you know, you're gonna see it and you're gonna feel it and you're gonna experience it and it's gonna be awesome.
Tony's talking about physical fitness, but I believe that the takeaway here is to embrace the process. Whether it's working out, learning to invest, or improving your personal finances, it's all really the same in that it all requires you to set goals and you have to be willing to stumble as part of the learning process. But as Tony said, with consistency, purpose, and accountability, you can be awesome. So you can do it. This is a great time of year to take some inventory, to reflect what worked in 2018, what didn't work, what goals do you want to set in 2019, and I urge you to set a big, audacious goal. I want you to think about it and set that today. Write it down, and then break that down into smaller goals so that you can set monthly goals to reach the big one. And if you really want to take it one step further and set weekly goals so that you can keep marching forward for the next 12 months and see where you end up at the end of the year. So that's it for this last episode of 2018. I wanted to keep it short and sweet. I hope that this episode can serve as a Cliff's Notes to either keep you on track, or if you haven't been listening to the show, I hope you got a taste for what we're all about, and I hope that you'll tune in to future episodes. Inspired Money is brought to you by Runnymede Capital Management. We help you to plan, invest, and worry less. What's your biggest financial challenge right now? Let me know. Email me at awang@runnymede.com. That's RUNNYMEDE.com or inspiredmoney.fm/Andy. Or let's continue the conversation at the Inspired Money Makers Facebook group. Go to inspiredmoney.fm/Facebook. I'd love to see you there. If you like Inspired Money, please tell a friend, share a favorite episode. It would really help to grow our community. All the music you're listening to right now and all other music on today's show is by the amazing Jim Kimo West. Aloha, Kimo. Have an inspired week. Do something that scares you, because that's where the magic happens.